Good to see everybody this morning. Is it good to see me? Yeah, okay. Very enthusiastic crowd this morning. That's okay. Well, so glad to be here. Laura and I, of course, have been here in Edmonton the last couple days. We're able to get with the youth ministry on Friday night and then had a 3-hour workshop yesterday. For those of you who were able to attend, really appreciate you doing that. And then, of course, we're here today. I think this is actually our last trip for quite a while. At least for the next month or so. We've been canceling our trips. But it's so glad that we're finishing off in Edmonton. So my name is Guy Hammond. I'm an evangelist here in Canada. I've led different churches in Canada. But about 12 years ago, started this side ministry called Strength and Weakness Ministries. And you know, I thought about 12 years ago as I was starting the ministry, I thought that we as a brotherhood around the world really did not have a plan in place to be able to help us as Christians reach out to our gay friends and neighbors. I thought there's a whole demographic of the world's population that we're ignoring because we're not sure what to say, we're not sure how to deal with the situation, we're not sure how it relates to people's in regards to matters of faith. And then I thought we also really don't have a plan in place to be able to help Christians who come from a homosexual background, but who as followers of Jesus still live with unwanted same-sex attractions. I thought that's a unique area of ministry, and people from a homosexual background but are now trying to follow under the ethic of Christ and the Bible would be, you know, facing some unique challenges. And I thought we should come up with something to be able to offer some help and support for these people. So I started this ministry, Strength and Weakness. My initial goal was to find 30 people. I thought if I could find 30 people to help, that would be absolutely amazing. But we found 30 in the first week, and the ministry just got bigger and bigger. We found, you know, went past 500, then past 1,000, and over the years it's just grown to a point where we're helping people all over the world. And so, anyway, yeah, one of the reasons why I was so glad to be able to come here to Edmonton and to be able to see you face to face, or for whoever's watching online, is just to express my appreciation. The ministry got to a point a few years ago, back in 2012, where we could no longer continue to lead a church in Canada and run this Strength and Weakness ministry. There was the sheer volume of people contacting us for help had become too much. And so we said, well, we're just going to quit our jobs then. And we'll stop leading churches and we'll just start doing this ministry. The challenge was that there was no support. There was no help. And so I had another Canadian evangelist actually call me and he said, hey, listen, did I hear that you're quitting your job? You know, you're not going to be in the ministry anymore to do this Strength and Weakness thing of yours? I was like, yeah. He said, so let me just ask you a couple questions to get this straight. He said, you're 50. I was like, yeah. He goes, you have 4 kids? Yeah. A couple kids with special needs? Yeah. Some kids going into college? Yeah. You have a mortgage? Yeah. Car payment? Yeah. He said, how much money have you raised for this ministry of yours? I was like, oh yeah, no, we don't have any money. So he goes, are you crazy? And then I got really insecure because I just thought I was being faithful. But anyway, I was like, yeah, you know what? If it's the Lord's will, it's the Lord's bill. I don't know how it's going to work out financially, but I'm not going to worry about it. And so we just started going around to friends and to churches and saying, hey, listen, here's what we're doing. We don't have any competition. We're the only game in town. We're the only ministry that's trying to deal with these really unique, out-of-the-box, controversial issues like homosexuality, transgender issues, sexual identity issues. So I don't know, there's nobody else doing it. I'm willing to. Are you willing to support me? So, you know, some churches and a lot of people who just send, you know, 10, 20, 30 bucks a month, that kind of thing. That's how we survive. There's no any one church that supports us. We just live off donations. And the reason why I'm so appreciative to you is because the Edmonton Church, the Capital City Church of Christ here in Edmonton, is one of the few churches in the world that has consistently been supporting us. And so when you, you know, give your contribution, I'm just one of, I'm sure, several things that you as a church, being as generous as you are, give to. So I'm a direct beneficiary of your kindness and generosity. When you give your contribution, yes, it goes to the running of the Edmonton Church, your congregation here, but I know it goes to other things. I just want you to know I'm one of them. My ministry is one of them. You may never know this side of heaven the names of the people you're helping, but they're in the thousands. And we couldn't do this ministry without this kind of support. So I just want to express my appreciation. Thank you very much for consistently joining us in this cause and believing in what we're trying to do. I'm really, really grateful for that. I started participating in homosexuality, believe it or not, around the tender age of 12, continued on until I was in my mid-20s. I had a boyfriend for 10 years. This is a picture of me when I was 20 years old. I recognize I have a little bit more hair going on there, but yeah, by the time I had hit that age, the age of 20 years old, I'd given up on God and church and Bible, and really just started crossing a lot of dangerous lines, making terrible decisions with my life. And by the age of 20, started acting out, having anonymous sexual encounters with strangers, that kind of thing. And I knew my life was in trouble. And so when I was 22, I really started thinking, God, you got to figure this out. You can't keep living like this. And so, in God's perfect timing, of course, God sent someone who invited me to church. And I was really hesitant, really skeptical, but decided to go. It was called the Toronto Church of Christ. I went. Loved what I saw and heard. The short story is it took me 2 years of going to church, 2 years of hearing the message, 2 years of building relationships with Christians until I got to the place where I finally decided I wanted Jesus more than I wanted homosexuality. And so I studied the Bible and changed my life forever. Became a Christian, was baptized on August 15th, 1987, and I can tell you, I have not participated in any kind of homosexual activity since my conversion 33 years ago. I don't know why God works the way He does. I would have thought by now, or would have liked to have thought by now, that I would have gotten over my same-sex attractions after 33 years of Christianity, but the reality is I'm just as attracted to men today as I was when I became a Christian 33 years ago. Hasn't even altered. But time and time again, I've heard God say to me, Guy, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness. And so I just trust in God's grace and mercy. He's blessed my life incredibly. One thing I never thought that would happen is that I would get married. And I did. Met this beautiful lady in the church, Kathy. We got married for 28 amazing years. Kathy was just such a huge blessing to my life. And we have 4 amazing kids. I don't have no idea how old they are. Don't even ask me. It'd be somewhere between the ages of, 19 and 26 or something like that. But, I got one son actually who lives in Madrid, Spain. And of course, Madrid is a complete lockdown right now. He's like, Dad, I can't even leave my apartment. It's crazy what's going on over there. In fact, get this. We considered the idea of maybe flying him home. Like, do we need to get him home, before all the flights stop? And Air Canada was selling flights from Madrid to Toronto for between $4,000 to $7,000. I was like, you guys, I know, isn't that crazy? I know, it was like, $800 a week ago, and all of a sudden now, they've jumped the price up like crazy. Thanks for that. Anyway, he's going to stay. And he's young, right? He's young, he's healthy, he'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. But anyway, Kathy and I, this is the ministry that we started, Strength and Weakness. And I would really encourage you to check out the website. Tons of information on there. It's all free. Lots of articles, videos. A good way for you just to educate yourself, right? To be able to know how to deal with these really complex, multifaceted issues. And maybe you're thinking, well, I don't know anyone who's gay. Well, then you are completely clued out. Of course you do, right? They're our next-door neighbors. They're our friends. They live in our neighborhoods. We go to school with them. We go to work with them. These people need to hear about Jesus. There's a way to be able to share the good news of Jesus in a way that doesn't lower the historical, biblical, sexual ethic, and at the same time lifts up the love, mercy, and compassion of Jesus. There are a lot of other Guy Hammonds walking around out there who want to hear about Jesus, and they can become Christians. But you got to know how to do it. So educate yourself. Go to my website. I've got some books here for sale. A good way to support our ministry. In fact, one of them is here. I got this one here, Thriving Beyond the Margins. 6 Bible studies. If you ever want to study the Bible with someone who's gay, there's the Bible studies right there. I wrote them all out. It's $10. Best $10 you'll ever spend. Caring Beyond the Margins. What every Christian needs to know about homosexuality. How to talk about this to your friends and neighbors. How to deal with this within your communities, at work, at school. And then there's this one I got back there too, Messed Up. I mentioned this one in particular. It's called Messed Up, Proof That You're More to God Than Your Mistakes. I mention it because I've looked at you and some of you look pretty messed up. So I thought this would be a good book for you, right? This is the book I wrote about, trust me, from someone who's messed up a lot, but is still standing, right? And really, this is a book about how to get over your past, how to get over the difficult things you've said or done. You thought, I don't know if I can ever recover from that. Yes, you can. Stop listening to those lies. You don't have to believe everything you think, and everything you think is not true, right? Well, sometimes we get these crazy thoughts in our heads and we think, oh, this is true. No, it's not. We have these recordings that go off in our head. Listen, everything you think is not reality, right? And so a lot of times we get stuff stuck in our head and we get stuck and we can't move beyond these things, and it hurts us spiritually and it hurts the people that we love. I think this book would really help you. Messed Up, proof that you're more to God than your mistakes. So, many of you would know by now, especially if you've been here this weekend, we went through a challenging time as a family. That is that my wife, Kathy, was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And she was given a year to live. They said to her, if you do chemo and radiation, we can maybe get you a year. No radiation, no chemo. You've got 6 months max. This is incurable. You're going to die. And so we as a family really huddled up, gathered together. This picture here was taken just 6 months before Kathy passed away. And she just went out full of faith and courage, and even to the point where I'm like, man, when I die, that's how I want to go. And just amazing. One of the things that she was really insistent upon is that I get married again. And so about a month before she passed, she called me into the hospital room and she was pleading with me, please get married again. And of course I was like, honey, where am I going to find a woman at this age? And you know, I'm same-sex attracted, like that's a hurdle right there. Like one wife is, you know, I've done it. This is great, but get married again. And I went back to the hospital the next day and she'd made a list of pre-approved names of women that she thought I could marry. And one of them was this lovely lady who had been a part of our group of friends for many years. Her name was Laura, and she was a widow. Her husband had passed away. Her husband, Scott, great guy, knew him very well. And Laura was the first name on the list. And so by the providence of God, of course, I connected with Laura back last January. We talked about it and, you know, just said, hey, listen, I'm available now. And you are too. So we started dating and started just an amazing friendship and relationship. And things went fantastic. I asked her to marry me and she said yes. And so that's me and my kids. 3 of my kids, one of them wasn't there that day, with me and Laura. We were married in September, and so we're actually newlyweds. It's only been 7 months since we've been married, but we're having a fantastic time, and we're really, really enjoying ourselves. So I'm very grateful for how God has worked and moved and all that He has done, please be praying for us and our ministry and all that we're trying to do. I would really appreciate that. So I thought I would share a little bit today about this idea that I have. I think actually this is what I'm going to call my next book. It's going to be called Use Your Mess to Bless. And I'm a big fan of that because as I told you, my life's been a mess many times, and I'm doing the best I can to be able to use my mess to be able to bless others. But I thought I would start with this story. There is an ancient legend about a Persian king who was discouraged, dejected, and sad. He called for his chief advisors, wise men, and court wizards, and charged them to invent a motto that would ease his pain during times of difficulty. He imposed 3 conditions relative to the wording of this motto. Number 1, not only did it have to encourage him in times of trouble, but secondly, the sentiment also had to be appropriate to keep him humble and grateful during times of prosperity and happiness. Thirdly, the motto had to be concise enough to be engraved on a ring which he intended to wear on his middle finger. So the wise men all got together and they tried the best they could to be able to come up with this motto, but no one was able to. And finally, and unexpectedly, the king's daughter presented him with a ring bearing these magic words: even this shall pass away. Even this shall pass away. In other words, nothing lasts forever. Not sorrow, not fame, not fortune or pain, nothing lasts forever. And if it's true that all good things must come to an end, then it also must be true that all bad things must come to an end. Now, bad times, difficulties, and challenges, they all surround us, don't they? In fact, I would think it's fair to say that life is simply made up of trying to solve problems. As soon as you've solved one problem, you've got another problem to deal with. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a time in my life, a day when I've woken up and thought, I have 0 problems today, right? But troubles come in different forms and different measures. The typical ones are things like more month than money, unemployment, difficulty in relationships, that aching back, that broken down car, that Visa bill whose amount due never seems to go down, or when we're lonely and isolated, when we're filled with guilt or shame, or when people that we trusted disappointed us, or when family has disappointed us, or when the church has let us down and it disappointed us, or when we've let ourselves down, or when we can't seem to move past these mountains that we kept praying that God would move and it never seemed that He did. These are challenges that everyone here this morning can understand from one degree to another. But then there are these other times in life when things get really serious. When we start facing life-altering crisis, like a critical illness in yourself or somebody that you love, or bankruptcy, or separation, or divorce, or chronic pain, or addiction, or depression, or the death of a loved one. You see, when crises like these or others enter our world, either in your life or in the life of someone that you love, I think it's helpful for us to remember that God has designed it so that we can recover, so that even in these, we will understand, even this shall pass away. And the Bible is actually full of lots of different examples on this too. In the book of Job, one of Job's so-called friends didn't really have a lot of good things to say, but you know, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. So this guy actually did have one decent thing to say. As he was talking to Job, he actually ended up saying this: "You will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as waters gone by." In other words, Job, I know you're scraping your body with clay, trying to get the boils off. I know your family's been wiped out. I know you've faced nothing but devastation here, and you're longing for death, but I want you to know, even this shall pass away. Have you ever committed a sin so grievous, so difficult, that you thought you could never be forgiven? It is too late for me. I've crossed too many lines. You know, David had that feeling after he committed adultery with Bathsheba, then had her husband killed on the front lines of battle. Yeah, that wasn't a good move. And so we see here in 1 Kings 11:39, God's response to this. Yeah, he's going to face punishment. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. In other words, even this shall pass away. In fact, regarding how God treats all of us after a time of rebellion and sin, it says in Psalm 30, verse 5, "For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping, it may come and stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." In other words, even this shall pass away. So it is a biblical truth that nothing in this world lasts forever. No problem, trouble, or crisis lasts forever. Even this shall pass away. And I think this is a gift from God to help us get through the difficult times. Oh yeah, God, well, what about physical pain? Yeah, I don't do very well with physical pain. Ever had a migraine headache that you thought would never go away? Yeah, it probably did. Ever had a broken bone, a twisted ankle, a sty in your eye, a bad toothache, some surgery that you thought you could never heal from? You did. Have you ever had that cold that just seemed to go on and on and on? You know, well, for most of us, you're not coughing anymore. At those times when nothing else seems to help, not the power of positive thinking, not drugs, not anything. At such times, God wants to remind us that no pain lasts forever. In fact, Job's discomfort was only temporary. The boils did eventually leave him. Even Christ's agony on the cross at the point of crucifixion mercifully lasted only 6 hours. Even that passed away. What about anxiety? Yeah, well, watching the news can cause a lot of anxiety, can't it? Yet I can tell you that whatever the world is upset over today, one day it will soon be forgotten. Events that once caused the world tremendous anxiety in years past are long gone and forgotten. Well, it would be crazy, obviously, for me not to mention the obvious, is we all stock up on extra toilet paper and chips. The two, essential things that we all need for life. But as we go through this current situation that we're all in, of course we need to pray for people's safety, but I'm telling you, one day soon, this situation will be talked about in the past tense. Just like the H1N1 pandemic of 2009. Just like the SARS outbreak of 2003. Just like the H3N2 pandemic of 1968. When's the last time you talked about that one? Just like the H2N2 pandemic of 1955. Remember that? Right. What about the Spanish flu of 1913? What about, the H1N1 pandemic that swept the world in, when was it? 1243. Read it the other day. Some of you might remember that one. Listen, the world moves on and we forget. Even 9/11 is an historical event. Some of you here today weren't even born, right? That's 19 years ago. So, what do you have anxiety over today? Terrorism, the economy, the high cost of living, a difficult relationship, Kim Jong-un and the possibility of nuclear war. Who will win the conservative leadership race? Will Trump win again in 2020? Listen, even this will pass away. Stay calm, right? Don't worry, even this will pass away. Even things like wars. If I was to say the word Vietnam, there's a segment of this population in the room here today that if they hear the word Vietnam, you come from a generation that would make you think of a horrific war that killed 1.5 million people. I say the word Vietnam to another generation of people in this room, and you think of a nice place to go on vacation when we're able to travel again because it's got nice sandy beaches. Whatever we're upset about and worried about today, even this shall pass away. What about temptation? Even here, God promises relief. No temptation lasts forever. There was a time in Jesus' life when he was being tempted by the devil himself. Time and time again, Satan tried his best to get Jesus to sin, but time and time again, Jesus held on to righteousness and refused to give in. In fact, it says in Luke chapter 4, verse 13, when the devil had finished all his tempting, get that, listen to that word all. I mean, how complete that is. When he had finished all his tempting, imagine being tempted by Satan himself, where he did everything, every trick up his sleeve, every temptation he could come up with. Satan, when he had done all his tempting for 40 days and 40 nights, the scriptures tell us, Satan left Jesus until a more opportune time. In other words, Satan tried and tried and tried, and then he was like, good Lord, I cannot get this guy to sin at all. You know what, I give up. Let's just back off here. I'm going to come back. I'm going to get him at another time, but I've done everything I can. I can't get this guy to sin. So even temptation eventually leaves you. No temptation will go on forever. Not only will God not let you and I be tempted beyond what you can bear, but the temptations eventually leave. No, I just have to say those nasty words. I just have to do it. I can't help myself. I have to have that toothpaste out of the tube moment. I just got to say that to my mom or dad. I just got to say this to my wife or to my husband. Or I just have to say this to the person who hurt me because I'm so angry and so hurt and I'm so upset. No, you don't. Shut up. Close your mouth. You don't have to say it. Control yourself. The temptation will leave. Deal with it from a spiritual perspective, for pity's sakes. No, I just have to be bitter. I love being critical. Just who I am. I was just born this way. I've always been critical. Mom was too. So it's just who I am. No, just get over it, for pity's sakes. Forgive like you've been forgiven. Right? A lot of times we think, no, I just have to look at this website. I just can't stop myself. No, you don't. Chill out. Calm down. I just got to go look at that channel. Listen, calm yourself, for pity's sake. Take a spiritual Valium and calm down. The temptation will eventually leave. You don't have to give in. Even this shall pass away. What about sorrow? Well, it's a different kind of pain, isn't it? Sometimes it can be more hurtful than any physical suffering that we can endure. Sometimes we can go through a grief that is so intense that it makes us physically ill. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been so sad, so heartbroken, you couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't face people because you were so emotionally disoriented? Yeah. You know, I think at times like this, we need to remember this. Experiencing crisis and problems is no excuse to stop living out your Christian faith. You know, with my wife Kathy, when she was diagnosed, so she was diagnosed in August, and then so in January, by January of 2018, by then she was in a wheelchair, and the Toronto church that we were a part of, a couple times a year, have this congregational event. The church is so large that they have to meet in campuses throughout most of the time, but they try to get together as an entire congregation, once or twice a year. And so there was this service coming up in January where Kathy was like, well, I really want to go to that. And I was like, honey, honestly, it's a long way. It's 2 hours away. You're in a wheelchair. That's a lot of work. Like, why don't we just stay at home? We'll have a communion together, do our own thing. She was like, no, I really want to go. I was like, no, honey, we should do it. She said, I want to go. I said, okay, I guess we're going. So, loaded the wheelchair into the truck and drove into Toronto. She had a great time at this thing, right? Really enjoyed herself. When it was over, we got back in the truck and we're driving up a highway called Highway 400 going north of Toronto. So I was going, about 120 kilometers an hour. And my son Greg was in the back seat, and Kathy's beside me, and all of a sudden she went into a full-blown seizure. She crippled up, hands went all these crazy contortions. She started foaming at the mouth. She was shaking uncontrollably. My son Greg was screaming in the back seat. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, I'm going to speed up and get her to a hospital. But no, I'm already going 120, like we're going to cause an accident here. So I said, okay, I'm going to pull over. So I pull off on the side of the highway, dial 911. She continued to seize, and an ambulance came, and they put her in the back of the ambulance and said, as she continued to seize, let's follow us to the hospital. So Greg and I followed this ambulance. We got into a hospital somewhere in the North York area. And by the time we got there, she was on a gurney in the hall. And by then the seizures had stopped, but they had continued throughout the trip in the back of the ambulance. So we were in this waiting area to see a physician, and the ambulance attendant came up to us and came up and said, Mrs. Hammond, listen, I'm going back on my shift. You're in safe hands now. Listen, I just want you to know, I will never forget what you told me in the back of the ambulance. So thank you for telling me that. And then he walks away. So I look at Kathy and I said, what did you say to this guy in the back of the ambulance? She said, well, I told him I was having these seizures because I have brain cancer and I'm about to die. But I wanted him to know that I'm not afraid to die because I know I'm going to heaven. And so I'm not anxious or worried. And I told him if he could read his Bible and go to church, he could learn how to be like that too when it comes his time to die. And I was like, who are you? Like, I've not shared my faith in like 6 months. You're in the back of an ambulance, sharing your faith. I'm like, oh man, it was so convicting. About a month before she died, by this time, Kathy was blind and paralyzed. And we were in a hospice facility. And she couldn't speak really very much. And actually, this was almost about 2 weeks before she died. And I said, honey, is there anything you want to confess? Anything you want to get off your chest here before you die? You can tell me, I can get some of the sisters in here, like whatever you want, but just so you can clear yourself. And she said, yes. She said, I need to apologize to someone. I said, okay. I said, well, let's get that person. What happened? She said, well, there was a lady that I was really rude to. I said some really bad things to her about 15 years ago. And it's always bothered me, and I've never said sorry, so I want to apologize. I was like, honey, it was 15 years ago. Like, I'm sure she's over it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it's okay, honey. You confessed it. We'll say a prayer. She goes, no, I want to speak to her. I'm like, okay, well, what's this person's name? Her name was Perlita. So she wants to speak to Perlita. I'm like, I don't even know where Perlita, we haven't talked to Perlita in 10 years. Like, how do I even get a hold of Perlita? Thank goodness for Facebook. So I said, okay, let me do the best I can, but I don't know if I can get Perlita in here. So contacted Perlita on Facebook, and she gave me the number. I called. I said, listen, we've not talked in a long time, but here's the situation. My wife is dying, only has a few weeks to live. This is her final confession kind of thing. And she and her husband were so gracious. We had not talked in many years, but they said, we're coming. We'll be right there. And they lived a few hours away, but they drove out to the hospice facility. They were so kind. And they came in, and I said, so listen, here's the situation. My wife said something rude to you or was mean to you. And Perlita was like, I don't even remember this. I'm like, okay, well, I figured that would probably be the case, but it's really on Kathy's heart. You know, can you come in and talk to her? I don't even know if she'll be awake by now. Kathy was sleeping like 22 hours a day out of it most of the time. I said, I don't even know if she'll recognize you're there, but let's go in and do this. So we get into the hospital room, and sure enough, Kathy seemed unconscious. We stood around, Perlita, her husband, myself, we stood around the hospital bed, and Perlita went up to her ear and she said, Kathy, it's Perlita. I'm here. I forgive you. And there was no response. So she tried again. Kathy, it's Perlita. I forgive you. No response. By now I'm crying, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just hold hands around the bed and we'll say a prayer. And so, you know, dear God, thank you for forgiveness. Please ease Kathy's conscience. Help her be at peace. Thank you that Perlita is so gracious and forgiving. You know, in Jesus' name, amen. And then all of a sudden, Kathy kind of grunts out, I'm forgiven. And she had been listening the whole time. And I said, yeah, you are, honey. And her and Perlita kind of communicated there for a minute, and they left. But, you know, as I went through that experience, honestly, the biggest thing I got out of that was, you know, if on my deathbed, you wanted to, you know, I needed to call in all the people I've been rude to in the last 15 years. You know, I mean, they would have been lined up down the hallway. You would have had to call in, you know, traffic police. I mean, I was like, seriously, this is the best you can come up with? This is your dying confession, and the best you can come up with is that, you know, you were mad at somebody 15 years ago? I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was, again, so convicted by her level of righteousness, but of her determination to make things right before she passed off into eternity, to make the apologies that she needed to make, to forgive who she needed to forgive. You know, Kathy was also a person who was intent on having fun before she died. And in January 2018, it was a cold winter day. We lived by a lake. It was about -20 out. And my son Wyatt, who'd moved in with us to help out, he yelled up the stairs and he said, hey, Dad, I'm going down to the lake to play some hockey. I said, okay, son, have a good time. And about a minute later, he calls back up. He says, hey, Dad, yeah, Mom wants to go down to the lake to play hockey too. Tell her no, she's in a wheelchair, she's dying of cancer, and it's -20 out. We're not going down to the lake. But a minute goes by. Hey, Dad, yeah, you better get down here. I go downstairs, she's trying to put her coat on. I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I want to go play hockey. I'm like, honey, you're in a wheelchair. Like, she goes, well, that's okay. Can't somebody just push me around on the ice? And I was like, oh, of course, I didn't want to go in -20-degree weather, but I was like, sure, let's go. So we put her in the truck, put the wheelchair in the back of the truck, got down on the ice. You know, my son Wyatt had his skates on. He was pushing her around. She's like, great time, right? Final story I'll tell you, just before she died, maybe like a week and a half, the doctor came in and said that she could die any day now. So I went and I said, honey, is there anything you want to do before you die? Any last wishes? And she says, I want to go swimming. I was like, of course, as I said, by now she's blind and paralyzed. She had movement in one arm. That was all the only thing she could move. I was like, honey, I can't take you swimming. Okay, you know what? I'll go talk to the doctor. I just thought the doctor would come in, talk some sense into her. So I went out into the hallway, got the doctor. I said, listen, she wants to go swimming. I mean, obviously we can't do that. The doctor said, why not? I was like, well, isn't it obvious? And the doctor said, what's the worst that could happen? I was like, you have a point, right? Like, I guess that's it. So we hired a six-man ambulance crew and got a nurse and called her family together. We made it into a picnic, went down to this lake, and just took her in. And for a half hour, you know, she was only able to move one arm, but you know, that was her dying wish. She passed away about 12 days later. All of this just taught me that life is so short. And we can either whine and complain and hold on to bitterness and anger, or we can go out, and live our lives in a faithful and courageous way that makes people go, wow, like that is inspirational, right? A few months before Kathy was dying, we made a little interview just to kind of send to our supporters, people who are helping us. And I thought I'd share this interview with you. It's just a couple minutes, and we'll close with this. But the question that Kathy was being asked was, what kind of legacy do you want to leave your children? What are you trying to tell your kids before you die? And this is Kathy, actually, just so you can see what she looked like before she passed. This is taken about a year before Kathy died. And this is the interview. If you guys can put that on for us. Thank you.
What would you say that you'd like your children to think of you as they're going through this time of watching their lives unfold before them? What would you say you'd want them to take away from your life and your legacy?
That's great. Yeah, I thought a lot about that, actually. And I obviously want them to love God. I want them to want to be with God. And that is what I think every day, to the point where I think it's made them actually think I'd rather be with God than with you. And they voiced that. So I had to be careful, because I do want to be with God.
Pretty pull.
That's a tough.
It is, though. It's a real pull. Like, it's a real, we all know we're going to die. We all know we're going to face that. We all know if we're Christians, we're going to get to go and spend time with God. And it's exciting to think about. I mean, he promises he's got this place prepared for us, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but I want my kids to think that's a place I want to be. I can't wait to get there. But yeah, I want my kids to know that the time God gave me here on earth, I used well and made good choices with that, and poured myself out, if I could be so bold as to, say that. But that my desire truly was to be with God.
Wow, look at you, honey. Wow. Go, honey. It's like you're in the Olympics. Oh my gosh. You are definitely getting all 10s from me, honey. Wow. Amazing. Oh, yes, there you go. Can you do a twirly? Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh my gosh, honey. How you doing, hon? Yeah, good. All right. Hi, honey. You're looking great, hon. You okay?
Yeah.
Only walking through this world for a moment. I know every day's a gift from you. I wanna turn these minutes into memories. So when my day comes and my time is through, let it be love I leave behind. Lord, I'm praying this will be the story that's mine. The way that I'm remembered, that my life be defined by the love I leave behind. The time on things are temporary. Wasted on what's only here and gone. My days are yours to use to make a difference. I wanna give my life for what goes on and on. Let it be love.
So, folks, I would like to think that none of us want to spend our time on things that are temporary. You know, as I watched Kathy live her final year, I recognized there is no excuse for not living your Christian life, even in the midst of difficulties. I know your problems are real. I know your pain is severe. I know life is difficult and challenging for you at times. But don't ever use these these realities as excuses to stop glorifying and honoring God with your life. You see, even in crisis, you can still share your faith. Even in crisis, you can still help others. Even in crisis, you can still be kind. Even in crisis, you can still forgive. Even in crisis, you can be positive in your outlook in life. You can still serve your community. Even in crisis, you can live out your Christian faith. So what are you facing right now? Financial insecurity, perhaps. Unhappy romance, perhaps. Unemployment, perhaps. Maybe you're in school right now fearing it'll never end. Or maybe you're lonely this morning. Or maybe you're grieving the passing of a loved one. Even this shall pass away. Listen, folks, all of life is fleeting. Only heaven is lasting. Only love lasts forever. Only God is from everlasting to everlasting. Only His Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior, is without end. And it is these that the Christian pins his and her hopes and aspirations, because these are the divine things that will never pass away. Meanwhile, this side of the grave, nothing lasts forever. Not your physical pain, emotional pain, your anxieties, your temptations, even terminal illnesses. Like the ancient Persian king who needed daily reminders, we too need to keep reminding ourselves that amid our crisis, even this shall pass away. Thank you. Amen.